Ok, benissimo. Ben ritrovati a tutti. Diamo un secondo la parola al professor Tiraboschi che si è ricollegato perché ci dispiaceva averlo salutato così.
Professor Tiraboschi, now. Professor Tiraboschi, can you hear us? We don't hear anything, Professor Tiraboschi. Now it's better, or at least we wanted to say hello. Yeah, you can speak.
Professor e ci dispiace per questi inconvenienti tecnici.
Mi sentite?
Sì, la sentiamo.
Inconveniences. Yes, we hear you. We can hear
Non so
you.
se mi vede. Sì, la sentiamo.
Maybe he doesn't see us. He's got a problem with his own internet connection as
Perfetto.
before.
Allora, solo per salutare.
I just wanted to say hello and say a few conclusive words. Namely, if you want to come up with an accurate analysis of the existing context, you need a model that interprets the data that has been surveyed or dynamic images. So, I think that an analysis based on this model has the same quality as an urban model based on the evidence morphology. And I really hope that next law will introduce evidence tests on infrastructures and materials. That was the last thing I wanted to say. I would like to say goodbye and thank you, and hope to stay in touch. Thank you, Professor. And
alla prossima volta e la ringraziamo per essere riuscito ad arrivare alla fine dell'intervento, insomma, nonostante le difficoltà tecniche. Bene, allora ben ritrovati e adesso.
And now, after our coffee break, we will tell you about evidence of the Adriseismic project. We've got various speakers now. There are so many partners, researchers, professionals who have dealt with the project activities. Giorgia Marzano, sorry, town planner, architect Giorgia Predari, architect and building engineer Gazmend, Llanaj, engineer and architect, who for the past 30 years has dealt with training. He's a teacher of this institute, and Babis, Fassoulas, if I have well pronounced your name, geologist, as a background, professor at the University of Crete, wow, and the head of Department of Geodiversity of Natural History of Crete, of the island of Crete. And now the presentation will be with various voices. We will start with Giulia. As soon as the computer comes to life. Apparently technology is against us this afternoon. Sì, ero accesa. Sì. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the nice introduction. Thanks for the invitation. My name is Giorgia Marzano. Let me start with some information about the Adriseismic project for the newcomers, new ones, and also for other attendees. So a couple of issues to start from. And the new approach for seismic improvement and renovation of Adriatic and Ionian historic centers. It is a territorial cooperation project funded within the Interreg program with the participation of 8 partners from 6 different EU member states from Adrian area. Most of them are here with us, and we are very happy and proud of having you here. We started in March 2020 at the beginning of the pandemic, and we managed to meet only after 1 year and a half since the beginning of our project. Challenges now. As the previous contributions showed, that the Adriatic Ionian area is vulnerable to natural risks. At the highest earthquake risk in Europe, we have identified common challenges, namely the lack of homogeneous and comparable policies when it comes to seismic risk prevention, need for common approaches in rules, regulations, techniques and training, and the need to transfer solutions and knowledge to the local context. So the objectives of the project are to share best practices, knowledge, to reduce the seismic vulnerability of the built environment, and harmonize town planning, urban planning after a seismic event, and to improve management of seismic vulnerability. The main focus of the project is historic centers. Squares, buildings facing the central square that are the symbol of local identity and the social economic heart of these settlements, typical of the Adriatic Ionian area. How do we do it? We are in charge of 3 main work packages. I will start from the first one. Work package number 1, analysis of the regulatory town planning, country planning context in partner countries. Secondly, development of methods and techniques for the assessment of vulnerability when it comes to seismic risk. And thirdly, training courses are to be started in for the reduction of seismic vulnerability. When it comes to the first work package, let's see what the 3 main activities that we have dealt with are. First of all, we have collected and ordered, systematized the knowledge, rules, regulations, incentives and other instruments in force in the various partner countries. We then focused on the assessment of consistency and effectiveness, and we then adapted local strategies by validating them with external stakeholders as well. So we first started from the collection of rules and incentives. We have systematized them by analyzing similar characteristics and differences, and we have identified the so-called best practices, virtuous examples, documents that are relevant and that might be replicated in other partner countries. Every partner has assessed scalability and replicability by partners. The ones that were not in force in one country were assessed by all partner countries, and a final judgment assessment was given as for their implementation, replication. So assessment has then led to roadmap, a strategic document to reduce earthquake risk. And then everything was done by means of 6 survey categories. First of all, seismic rules and regulations. And we have collected all the rules and regulations for structural planning of new buildings, assessment of safety of the buildings that already exist, of extant buildings, then assessment of building rules and regulations, permits, building permits, and we have collected all the various documents, including rules and regulations parameters to be complied with for the design implementation of new buildings, and there was applying to regeneration of already existent buildings. The various documents as for Italy, or a few cases like the municipality of Bologna and so on and so forth. As for town planning laws, we have collected all of them related to regional planning, development of urban areas, and we have mainly concentrated on the Emilia-Romagna region, and to the most recent law dating from 2007. Together with engineer Marinelli, we have enlarged our collaboration to other Italian regions, and we have encompassed the market context. Then we have dealt with incentives, direct incentives, funds, subsidies that might serve as a contribution and an incentive to reduce seismic vulnerability, but also other types of incentives to therefore raise citizens' awareness, tools that are meant to achieve these various instruments. As for awareness raising, and then we've got all the various laws, rules and regulations concerning civil protection, and last but not least, insurance. Unfortunately, this issue was not really implemented in all the various partner countries, and so it has been regarded as an important theme in order to get to the identification of best practices. As for the results of this analysis carried out within all the partner countries, we had 88 documents subdivided, as you can see here, and all these documents were analyzed according to the same methodology to extract the main features. Then each partner identified possible best practices. As already said, what is a virtuous habit or a document that can contribute significantly to the reduction of the seismic risk. As for the analysis of the various documents has led to about 20 best practices. I cannot read all of them also because I don't want to bore you. It would take too much time. As you can see, they are all related to incentives. And within seismic rules and regulations, they make up the majority of best practices. And then we asked all the partner countries to assess the possible repetition of best practices that are not yet applied in the partner country, with an explanation putting it into practice, and also in terms of scalability. A best practice that is applied locally in a certain country, for it to be effective, it has to be applied at a wider scale in another country. So this is the result of replicability and scalability of good practices. Every country has issued its score, and the average was assessed according to the various opinions and scoring. All these various assessments and information then led to the development of a roadmap. Every partner country has got its own roadmap, which is a strategic document to be broken down into successive steps to be undertaken to improve the integration and implementation of prevention measures to improve resistance to vulnerability to seismic risk concerning various areas, including insurance. To conclude, I would like to say that this result and all the intermediate results that I've shown you, replicability, best practices, and so on and so forth, have been validated together with stakeholders at a local level with workshops that have been organized in all the various countries. We held 4 workshops that were meant to disseminate the various results to be validated at a local level. Thank you for your kind attention. And now the floor goes to Professor Predari.
Good afternoon also from my side. And now I will present the contents and the results that we have obtained with the second work package that was included in the project. We've been working as a coordination group at the University of Bologna with engineer Stefanini, who is in attendance and can surely support me in case of need. Second package is oriented towards defining methods and techniques for a fast evaluation of seismic vulnerability and of the intervention techniques so as to provide for the security of the built heritage. And we, as a research group at the University of Bologna, have led these working group and with the collaboration of other partners in countries who have provided their insights and validated the procedures we decided to adopt. Now, within the package, the main objective was to define the methodology of analysis, so considering seismic vulnerability at an urban scale. The idea was not to just have a seismic safety index that was autonomous and independent from the context, but rather to have a large-scale mapping of the vulnerability of an historical built heritage that is most of the times under protection, because normally the focus is on historical centers, so the built areas in historical heritage sites. Now, we have considered the approach to be adopted, the method, and hence the validation of this procedure has been considered within all of the member countries of the project. Once this method was put in place, then we have tested and used it in other contexts. The activities conducted have gone through this pathway, starting with an analysis of the state of the art. When evaluating the seismic vulnerability of broad surfaced heritage sites in urban settings, what should be the starting point? Can we actually find analogies amongst the various countries that we have considered? So, of course, we also considered to study more carefully the characteristics of the heritage in terms of constructive characteristics, in terms of the main techniques for intervention, as well as the ways in which vulnerability of the heritage is concerned. Hence, we came to some considerations wherefrom we could derive a specific methodology for the evaluation of seismic vulnerability of buildings with walls and with reinforced concrete structures. So the text of this procedure was considered within some of the involved countries as well as outside those countries with a scientific approach that enabled us to compare this activity with normally standard utilized methods. Concerning the state of the art, we have produced a series of databases relating to construction technique, to the characteristics of the existing heritage, in terms of coverage, in terms of foundations, identifying 41 different constructive solutions. A second database concerned the methods for interventions, so the techniques utilized for safeguarding the heritage. We have 80 of them. We've considered different materials, we've considered different solutions, steel, reinforced concrete, walls, and the last part was relating to the evaluation methods, which we have divided into two parts. First one was the post-seismic evaluation of the damage and the pre-seismic evaluation. So the technical experts within the administration consider the problem of seismic risk under this respect. So the initial mapping made it possible for us to understand some of the main points based on which we could develop our method. First of all, in terms of the technique, we have homogeneous techniques in all the construction techniques in all the countries involved, both concerning reinforced concrete structures as well as walled structures. We have surveyed the heritage with the various partners in the project. There are some time lapses in utilizing a solution rather than the other, but in general terms, in terms of materials and techniques, practical applications, the solutions are basically the same. This enables us to put in place a uniform method in the 6 countries involved in the project. So the techniques were less homogeneous, especially from a cultural standpoint, rather than from a technical one, with some delays from some countries in terms of using the most innovative solutions. But in this case too, we know what the solutions are. Some of them are more utilized, others are less utilized, but at least we have a common know-how also in relation to the interventions. Then differences were found in the numerical evaluation, with approaches that vary from I do not have any technical instruments, or right now I use quantitative analysis only. So through these considerations, we could therefore develop our approach to the topic of vulnerability, considering a method that should be a kind of a zero level evaluation, so well before level 1 as per the law or as per the norm. It should be an instrument that enables us to identify some risk classes in the built environment that can be then further deepened down through a series of other analyses that are available in different countries. The method we have put in place and that I would like to concentrate upon during my presentation is based on the common elements or common methodologies that countries have in order to make large-scale analysis of the existing heritage. Now, so short times were interesting, or the necessity to use a broad set of data in relation to a single building that should be carried out in short times. And of course, having all the information available that is necessary is something we need in order to identify the most probable mechanisms of damage. So what is the probability that something is damaged and how? So we've put in place different tools, one for wall structures and the other one for reinforced concrete structures that have a common basis. But of course the data to be utilized are diversified, and the objective is what you see here. That is to provide vulnerability classes that enable us to create hierarchies of intervention types, so the most vulnerable assets will be given priority as a consequence. That was the final objective. So we put in place two parallel methodologies, as we could define them, that were based on research, based on a scientific procedure of the most important or influent parameters, going through a numerical analysis of the evaluation of vulnerability that was pretty much simplified. So the seismic availability index and seismic risk indices were considered. So not just the construction parameters, but also the ways in which we utilize those buildings and the number of people that we find in those buildings, which is the exposure. Through a series of different studies that were done on the topic, considering Italian and foreign norms, but also scientific bibliography, we could define the parameters that are considered for both reinforced concrete buildings and other buildings. So these are the elements we considered in our method of evaluation, and I would like to concentrate on the quality of the walls. Probably this is the most important part in relation to those buildings. For this reason, we decided to consider studies carried out by the Professor Boris research groups that has considered a wall quality index on the basis of the parameters you see there. And an estimate of those masonry parameters enables us to identify the quality of the walling for both vertical and horizontal loads. This is why we decided to include that parameter into the method. The same procedure was followed for buildings with reinforced concrete frame buildings. We've utilized these methods where we have the greatest difficulties in identifying the reinforcement of those structures. The original construction projects are not available. This is therefore a parameter that we estimate on the basis of the norms that applied at the moment of construction, but we know that those norms were often neglected, and therefore we introduced an empirical component based on a series of buildings that we have surveyed in different historical periods. You see here two Excel sheets
dove la prima parte per entrambi è dedicata alla
So after a part devoted to the description of the structural features and of the materials used, the construction characteristics, type of walls and IQM as defined by Professor Waring, the characteristics of the building and the use of the building, the load acting on each floor or the distance between one reinforcement and the next one, and the interfloor distance and data relating to the location of that site. The results are a structural response index in relation with the seismic vulnerability of the building, which is represented according to different classes, ranging from 1 to 7, where 1 is the highest vulnerability, 7 the highest resistance class, then a wall resistance index, so wall quality of the building, then how that building can be damaged by an earthquake. So classical mechanisms have been considered too. And seismic risk given by the formula that considers exposure and number of users. Now, a similar sheet has been prepared for the reinforced concrete buildings. Now, once this is defined, we tried to apply it on 3 pilot areas. One area was in Bologna, then in Castella, and one in Rete. And here we have selected 3 different areas where we wanted to apply the method, this estimate method. At the same time, we validated it from a scientific standpoint in an effort to understand whether the results we found through this procedure could show some similarities with the analysis made with other calculation software or qualitative methods. We made the evaluation on 35 buildings on top of the case studies for which we already had results retrieved from an analysis of the walled buildings or analysis retrieved from the calculation software. These are the pilot areas. In Bologna we worked in this area, close to the university. These are the buildings involved in the project. If we consider the Bologna case, that is in front of the National Pinacothèque, where we have university buildings, as opposed to buildings that are traditionally residential buildings that go back to the medieval period. So the analyses were conducted on all of these buildings. We have also made surveys through scanners that have enabled us to make more thorough estimates, and we could refine the method both for walled and reinforced concrete buildings in the 3 areas of the study. This is the Bologna case once again, where we studied 5 walled buildings plus a concrete reinforced frame building. We've identified the vulnerability classes and the seismic risk from low, ranging from low to high. So in the case, for example, from buildings with a reduced number of users up to a level of a high seismic risk according to the parameters set forth. Here you see all the three case studies in the pilot area. You see how values are distributed. We have quite a high variability in the structural response, and also as far as seismic risk is concerned. The result is influenced by the exposure, that is, by the number of users utilizing those buildings, but variability is quite good. Concerning the validation with buildings that were assessed also via the calculation software, we have studied 25 masonry buildings evaluated through our method LV1 or a model analysis. And in the table you see in yellow the model analysis result, and in mustard yellow the result that is derived from our method. There are, of course, some differences, and they are evident, say, up to 25%. But in general terms, our method yields lower results as compared to the model analysis or the analysis with V1, which is a consolation because we're not estimating the response of the building in an expedite method. The fact that we have more restrictive results compared to a calculation software is the correct approach. We will, of course, continue with the methodology so as to obtain results that are even more easily comparable. Here the colors are reversed. The darker green refers to the method. The pale color is related to the model analysis, and in this case too the average difference is 25%, and in terms of result we see that our method is generally yields lower values. There are, of course, some exceptions linked to special cases. And this way we could fine-tune the result of the calculation sheets. The last thing is the application of the procedure. The project also proposes local action plans, and some of the local and regional public authorities involved in the project have considered that according to specific needs in that area, they may utilize strategies which have been then considered as included in the urban planning schemes. Our partners have given themselves the objective of identifying the best strategies to integrate the reduction of seismic risk in their own urban systems for identification of such risks, as well as in the national planning system at their disposal. This is an activity that is going to be concluded this month, and we could include all these in the plan of evaluation. So that's all. And I would like to leave the floor to my colleague for the presentation of the last part. And I would like to welcome Professor Tondelli from the University of Bologna, and she'll probably conclude this meeting.
La terza parte del progetto Adriseismic si rivolge
And now the third package of Adriseismic concerns an important section which is fundamental that we are specializing in our college for technical building students, if we want to have an impact on the urban regeneration and improvement of seismic vulnerability, we need to train people. So the third package of the project concerns training packages to be developed and everything that goes with it to do right kind of training according to the various targets envisaged by the project that has been identified during the duration of the project. So we identified a few main targets, namely the technical ones, in order to provide detailed, in-depth, specific training concerning this issue. So we've been using a term which is seismic retrofitting, but if you deal with seismic regulations and adjustment, there is a distinction. But anyway, as far as our project is concerned, we have opted for the seismic retrofitting concept. So by analyzing the whole process to see how the retrofitting of historic buildings happen, we have identified the technicians, the professionals dealing with, in a way or another, of the process of design of the various projects working in the various sectors. So then civil servants who do not necessarily have the necessary training, who are part of the seismic retrofitting and who need general knowledge concerning topics concerning the process-related skills. The core of our daily activities for builders, of course, people have to be well trained and skilled when working in a building yard, right? That was another target that was identified. And then fourthly, the voluntary workers from civil protection that we have focused on to try and understand what the contribution might be
loro come gruppo appunto anche sociale nell'ambito della prevenzione sismica.
So that we can have a go in the field of seismic prevention.
Il terzo pezzo del nostro progetto Adriseismic era appunto quella di fare un'analisi.
And then we wanted to come up with an initial analysis of the state of the art, so that we can see what is done in training professionals working in the seismic field in Italy and other areas. We wanted to come up with detailed packages and a toolkit for voluntary workers working for civil protection, and the final findings and results achieved in collaboration with all the various partners to understand whether we really hit the target, whether what we really found out can be actually true and useful for the future. so that every specific countries, we know that has got its own specificities, regional or centralized management systems. And of course, these various differences have to be summarized and taken into account in training packages that have to be the same for everyone.
Nella prima fase abbiamo visto che tutto sommato un po' per
In the
necessità,
first
diciamo
phase,
anche per questioni direi storiche,
out of
Italia e
necessity
un po'
and because of historical
un po'
reasons,
meno forse la
in Italy,
Grecia
a bit
e la
less maybe
Slovenia
in Greece or in
fanno un
Slovenia,
confronto, ma in genere si tratta di formazione
they
che viene rivolta ai
information and
tecnici,
training is
molto
provided
specifica,
that is
tecnico-appunto
highly specific and it is
stretti,
addressed to
argomenti molto
technicians
specifici
with reference to
e sul
specific
paese, per quello che
topics.
siamo riusciti
And as
a
far as we
scoprire, analizzare
know,
appunto
according to
dalla
the
fase di
findings
fatto
of
di
the
tutti i paesi
project,
coinvolti nel progetto,
in the various
ha una
partner countries,
formazione
nobody has
coerente,
a
completa per queste
complete
figure.
training for these
Sappiamo che sono
types of
fatti in modo
occupational
tecnico,
profiles.
tecnici, insomma,
You
si è
technicians, you
preparato in
know
maniera più o
what
meno
your
teorica, a
background
parte il
is.
Daniele, che è
You
uno di nostri
have
coetanei,
a
no?
technical,
Istituto universitario,
theoretical
parte di tutto
background
ciò che è
acquired
naturalmente
during university or
più
during continuous
professionale.
training,
Ma
right?
è difficile trovare
But it
appunto
is
un'offerta
also
formativa
difficult
che
to
sia
find a
completa e
complete
tema e
training
studi
package
appunto tutto ciò che è
that
necessario
covers
per poter fare
everything
una
that is
formazione unica
necessary to
che
have a
appunto
single
permetta di
overall
costruirsi tutte le
training, to
competenze
have the
necessarie per
necessary
affrontarsi
skills
il
and
proprio ruolo
competencies to
professionale.
work in this
E abbiamo
process.
visto che appunto tra i provider,
So,
tra chi
among the
fa
various
la formazione
providers,
ci sono ovviamente
the
le
ones
università, le associazioni di
providing
ordini
training, we have the
professionali in Italia
university,
con ordinamento molto
the
particolare e
professional
ovviamente alcune principali anche
associations,
scuole edili
and
che
as well
sono
as
chiamate
technical
appunto a fare
colleges like this
formazione
one,
sulle
providing
imprese e i
training
lavoratori edili appunto
for
per entrare purtroppo
builders
sempre dopo i
to
terremoti e andate appunto
take
di
action,
necessità anche
unfortunately, in the
formativa sul
aftermath,
resto
after a
del
seismic
territorio.
event that has
E
occurred,
nella
in
seconda parte
addition to
appunto
other natural
delle nostre
disasters.
attività abbiamo dovuto identificare
In the
quelle che
framework
erano
of
le
our
competenze
activities, we
necessarie appunto per
also
l'ordine,
wanted
compiti
to
missioni che abbiamo fatto e da
identify the
prendere questi
core
ranking
skills.
di persone
We
appunto molto
have
diverse,
selected these
diverse
three
e
categories
individuare le competenze che potevano essere
of
necessarie,
professionals to
andando a
identify
suddividere
the
queste
core skills, and we
competenze
have
e cercando ovviamente di non sovrapporle a quello che è, dicevo prima,
subdivided
la
and
formazione base,
uh,
scolastica o
selected
universitaria dei
these skills
tecnici.
apart from the
Ovviamente sapete
general
noi stiamo
background
impegnati in questi termini
provided by
oggi o
university
per l'Ippleino
or
o
high
geologi
schools to
o
the
altri
various
edili appunto che
professionals,
necessariamente
be they
conoscono
architects
e
or
hanno
land
studiato la
surveyors
preparazione
or
individuale, personale, scolastica,
engineers,
universitaria
other
sui vari
professionals who have
servizi.
received
E nella
theoretical
prima fase ci
knowledge,
siamo
but who didn't
concentrati
really
appunto
have
sulle
the
necessità
opportunity
legate
to
anche
have an
alle
in-depth
novità tecnologiche, alle
knowledge of all
innovazioni
these topics.
digitali che si stanno
And then
facendo, che si
we also
muove,
need to take
quindi
into
laser
account
scanner,
ICT, laser scanner,
insegnamento non solo per le
BIM,
costruzioni
to be
nuove, ma
used
anche
not
per gli
just
edifici
for
esistenti
new
e così via. Quindi tutte le
buildings, but
competenze
also
che
for
servono,
extant
necessarie se
buildings.
vogliamo appunto ragionare in termini strategici appunto sulla prevenzione sismica. E poi una parte centrale che ha a che fare appunto con aspetti sempre più o meno centrali del lavoro di uno strutturista, ma non solo. Non
And
abbiamo
then
pensato a
structural engineers.
sostituire
We
lavoro
haven't just
ai
focused on
tecnici, abbiamo
engineers
pensato a
or
tutti i tecnici e
dealing with
cercando di dare
calculations,
la possibilità
but
per
we
loro
have
di dire
thought
questi
about all the
temi
various
e
technicians
quindi di farsi
and
una
professionals.
formazione possibilmente sempre incentrata sul tema a 360 gradi. Abbiamo persino con la preziosa collaborazione e
So we
contribuzione appunto
also
di Bologna
have a
inserito anche
precious
dei
support and
móduli uno di cui per
contribution by the
esempio
university,
riguarda le
the
competenze comunicative,
municipality of
no? Perché
Bologna
appresso a
concerning
osservare quello che
communication
professavano soprattutto
skills.
prima nel loro intervento in cui parlavano appunto di questo passaggio dal parlare di cifre o di pietre a parlare
So
alle
we
persone,
shouldn't
alle
just
persone.
talk
E
about
quindi la
stones and
capacità anche
bricks,
comunicativa,
but
soprattutto
also
delle
to people,
competenze appunto dei tecnici,
humans.
molte volte sono messi da
And
parte il loro lavoro quando si
therefore
tratta
we
di
need
affrontare
to
poi la persona che poi
take
sarà il proprietario
people into
dell'edificio e di
account,
affrontare sia
not
appunto queste
just
problematiche
the
contrapposte che comporta appunto il prendere e rivoltare
so
un
we have to
complessivo
have a
dell'edificio,
human
ovviamente anche le
being
competenze di
centered approach, communication, how to communicate risks, advantages and disadvantages, and also how to be able to be a good and skilled technician, engineer, but also be able to speak in a simple language in order to communicate to everyone, especially during a seismic event. The same has been done towards civil servants. We tried and identified what civil servants might need who do not necessarily have a technical background. People who need to have a technical knowledge before funding. They need some knowledge basis. Skills, so that all these various stakeholders and people are aware of what it means to do the prevention. Something that is easier, but is not so easy in practice, is to provide training to builders, workers working in the building yard. Down there you've seen a magic world. So we also teach those practical activities in our lab.
E mi ricordo che un po' di anni fa ho dovuto costruire insieme a qualcuno dei miei colleghi, per la prima volta ho dovuto fare un muro che simulava anche le crepe.
And we also envisaged and simulated a cracked wall in the aftermath of an earthquake to see what to do in terms of implementation of new techniques.
Delle fibre, delle fasciature, eccetera. E quindi anche qui appunto i moduli che abbiamo pensato sono più operativi.
And so our modules are operational.
Devono comprendere i processi, ma devono avere competenze manuali. E quindi anche la formazione che abbiamo pensato per questo target, appunto.
And so we wanted to have this kind of focus.
Abbiamo sviluppato appunto i materiali per questi tre gruppi e fondamentalmente la formazione che abbiamo preparato consiste in una specie di guida.
So Moodle is detailed guidelines by modules, and all the contents that need to be covered, to be provided, is not just a simple mapping of skills that is not so difficult, but we wanted to enter into details. So we wanted to actually provide this kind of training to all the various professionals, and we worked in collaboration with teachers and experts of the field within our technical college, and all this kind of material was uploaded on the Moodle platform to be made available to anyone. And as for the first target is concerned, there is also self-learning possibility. We know that a technician has got more cultural and basic skills approach to acquire specific skilling, and so the training packages or modules might concern a complete course that might last between 50 or 60 hours, to individual modules that can be picked on demand for self-learning purposes. But that is, of course, meant to technicians who already have a basic background. Inside, you find a lot of contents. If you're interested, please go and have a look at it. You can register and use it as a tool, also as a point of reference for you, if you like. In terms of self-learning, you can do this kind of self-learning and according to the requirements and timing that you have. A few examples of contents that you can find inside
argomento abbiamo sviluppato poi delle unità di apprendimento e quindi
And
sono delle
then
vere e proprie lezioni.
learning
Fondamentalmente ogni modulo
modules,
sono all'incirca
lessons are
3-4
also
ore di
developed,
informazione,
3-4
appunto,
hour
e
long
tra l'altro ci
classes.
sono proprio delle video lezioni anche all'interno. E quindi l'idea appunto era quella di dare maggiore
And so,
entusiasmo, come dicevo prima, ad aspetti tecnologici, innovativi e così
innovative
via.
technological
Per esempio, prima
aspects
si
have
parlava anche della
priority.
possibilità
We
di
also talked about the
analizzare da un punto
opportunity
di
to
vista
analyze
proprio della qualità del
the
costruito, no?
quality
Aspetti
of
di materiali,
the
strutture, eccetera.
built
Quindi anche dei moduli in
materials,
cui si
buildings,
va a vedere anche quali
including
sono gli strumenti
modules,
in
to
grado di fare
understand what the
appunto quelle
instruments
diagnosi
are
costruttive.
to
In calcio abbiamo tanto
carry out in-depth
incertezza
knowledge.
che è abbastanza
We know that
elevata per questa
uncertainty
frammentazione
percentage is quite
e
high in this
bisogna essere
field,
molto consapevoli di
and
tutti gli
so we
strumenti che abbiamo. Poi anche
need to
chiarire
use
gli
all the
insiemi all'interno di questi
uh,
moduli formativi
tools
ci
that
sono
are
anche delle
available,
valutazioni di questo tipo. Quando vanno
and then we
utilizzati
need
degli
to
strumenti
understand
precisi in
when you need
margine
to
sulle strutture,
use
quando
the
invece vale la pena
specific
stare leggeri per cercare
tools or
appunto
not.
di capire in maniera diversa e più soft e più speditiva appunto aspetti di valutazione sulla vulnerabilità sismica. Questi sono
Can be
di essere utilizzati come
used in a
facendo
self-learning
apprendimento organizzati da chi ha
organized
fatto
by
largo titolo per fare
people
interessi
who
appunto e poi
have
svolgere
this
e
kind of
ancora con un
interest,
metodo diverso, interesse generale che
and if
chiamiamo.
you have a general interest in
E
these sorts of topics.
all'interno del
And
nostro
then
pacchetto
when it comes to
formativo, nel
our
nostro pacchetto c'è
training
anche, come dicevo
package,
prima,
you
un
also
kit
find
formativo, quindi una specie
a
di
training
set di
kit, a
attrezzi anche
sort
per i
of
volontari. Anche in questo
toolkit for
caso,
voluntary
in
workers,
collaborazione con l'Università di Crete,
and
anche quella che ci presenta appunto come
in
nostra partner,
collaboration with
e
the
loro se ne sono occupati un
Trento
po' maggiormente di
University.
questo aspetto. Invito Babis a farmi la
Babis,
salva.
please support me now.
E prima ve l'hanno già presentato, in più non c'è bisogno di presentarlo.
People introduce him to
E
you, no
abbiamo
need for
lavorato veramente
introduction.
molto bene in
We
questo
have
periodo,
worked
è stato
so
un
very
vero
well
piacere
together. It
perché
was a true pleasure
la qualità
also
del
for
trattamento delle persone a
the
volte
quality of
può
people,
sembrare diverso.
human
È stato davvero
capital
ottimo. E
matters.
quindi
It was so
ringraziamo
nice
tanta
to meet him,
fortuna che almeno
and
per
I
me
was so happy and lucky to meet him
reduce tra l'altro
and
di
work
uno
with him.
delle sue lezioni
And
nell'ultimo
I just
viaggio che c'è stato a
attended
Creta
one of the most recent
probabilmente
classes
Creta
in
che si
Crete.
muove, perché ovviamente lui è
Crete
diplomato geologo e
is
quindi
a
ci fa
geologist.
capire che altro che
He
stare fermi, insomma.
and
Per
let
Crete
us
tra un po'
understand that
quest'anno ci troviamo
everything
lontano
moves.
dall'Africa e
So
bisogna
Crete
organizzarci
in
bene.
one day will be closer to
Funziona
Africa than
benissimo.
today.
Tornando
So
quindi al
just
nostro
it is not a
argomento
joke.
appunto, loro si sono occupati
So
maggiormente
they have
di questo
mainly dealt
aspetto, cioè
with this
quello
kind of
di
aspect,
definire un po'
namely
meglio la
defining the
categoria e
category
il ruolo professionale
of the
dei
professional role played
volontari, ma
by
anche
voluntary
proprio
work is,
all'interno di appunto
and so
questo
that
nostro progetto, cioè prima che
how
ci sia un
what
terremoto, i
they
volontari
can
cosa fanno
learn
innanzitutto?
before an
Questa è una cosa
earthquake
che ci spiego.
happens. What about a
Dopo che tutti
voluntary
sono
worker of
utilissimi,
the civil
sono
protection?
e sono
What can he do?
preziosi, ma
Afterwards, we
quindi
know that
possono
they are
dare
very
moltissimo
precious, but
in
after
base
before
e
the
al
event,
termine quando
what
non
can they
abbiamo
do?
l'intelligenza di averlo. E quindi siamo partiti proprio da questo
And
ragionamento,
so
da
we
queste
started
considerazioni
from here
che
to
appunto
build all
il
this.
mio breve percorso appunto era
And
esattamente questo. Lascio la parola a te
and
per
now I would like to give the
tradurlo
floor to
direttamente
him.
dall'inglese
Grazie.
all'italiano.
Vado a mettere le pile? Sì.
Well, as Gus has already presented, in every place we have a lot of volunteer groups. Some of them are engaged also with civil protection. And there is always a need to include these people into some activities.
Tenete presente, lo dico per chi ovviamente, come è giusto anche che sia, non conosce il contesto degli altri paesi, ovviamente si tratta di figure che ci sono in tutti i nostri paesi, almeno nei paesi partner c'è la protezione civile, ci sono i volontari ma ovviamente ogni paese ha le sue specificità e quindi siamo dovuti partire appunto proprio da questo.
And many of the people who are participating in this groups are very well skilled in modern technologies. They have quite good scientific background, and they have the willingness to contribute in any opportunity that it is given to them. I know that, as Gaz has already mentioned, in every country there is a different legislation and different level of intervention of these groups, but in any case it is always useful to include them in civil protection activities, either before an emergency or after an emergency case.
In genere appunto quello che è un aspetto positivo di questi gruppi di persone è la loro capacità, la conoscenza. Parliamo spesso di giovani appunto che hanno buone capacità e competenze di tipo informatico, digitale eccetera, e quindi abbiamo cercato anche di tener conto di questo, pur spesso non avendo queste persone una formazione specifica di tipo tecnico, e quindi abbiamo cercato di capire, di considerare quanto possono essere utili, appunto come accennavo anch'io poc'anzi, quanto possono essere utili nella prevenzione sismica e non nei momenti solo di emergenza.
But I think it is wise to train these groups in advance in order to be effective in case that they will be necessary to support us. And that's why we actually scheduled this toolkit. It's not actually like a course because it's as you will see, it's a toolkit which aims to give them some basic information about the civil protection mechanism in a European scale and then in a global one, as it will be here. And we have here the different courses, but also to give them some specific skills that they could support some of the professionals, because they cannot intervene deeper into some of the intervention activities or the inspections or in the expenditures needs that we have, and also to, as they are voluntary groups, to give them some, let's say, hands-on activities and other tools that in some way they will be trained in some of these courses.
Abbiamo pensato fondamentalmente di dare a queste persone appunto la possibilità di approfondire intanto degli aspetti un po' trasversali che riguardano appunto i meccanismi e le regole della protezione civile anche a livello europeo. Ovviamente uno dei massimi obiettivi di tutti questi progetti, dei progetti Adrion appunto, è quello di creare strumenti per il futuro, insomma, e fare in modo che i nostri paesi, non solo i paesi partner ma anche gli altri europei appunto, abbiano il più possibile un'uniformità di veduta e perlomeno di strumenti, no, per poter affrontare le cose. E quindi questa prima parte, poi una seconda parte che riguarda appunto gli strumenti per poter essere appunto queste persone utili all'interno del processo. Non possono, come diceva Babis, andare in profondità nei loro, non possono avere dei compiti così complicati e specifici nell'ambito del retrofitting sismico, ma potrebbero dare un contributo appunto magari in collaborazione con tecnici, con enti pubblici o comunque organismi che sono in grado di organizzare quindi campagne o magari speditive o comunque una valutazione sulla vulnerabilità sismica del territorio, e quindi queste persone possono essere utili. E anche una terza parte
can be very useful. And also, there's also a third part.
It was not about
yes,
the
yes,
third.
but we have the third is about the retrofitting methods that we used, some of the courses that we have developed for the workers. And I have an example that I can share with you, because last year a strong earthquake happened in Crete, quite close to our town, and about 7,000 buildings actually suffered damages, some of them quite severe, with let's say more than 2,000 buildings almost collapsed.
And when the earthquake happened, more than 250 volunteers arrived at the place, but for several days they had nothing to do because there was no plan, they were not engaged, they didn't have the training to intervene. And imagine that during the first and the second stage of inspections that were made by practitioners, it was a huge work that quite a few people were dedicated to perform it. So we think we are already collaborating with several of these groups under Adriseismic, and some of them also participated in the workshops that we developed in our local level. And this is something that we are aiming also to continue to engage them further, together also with workers. And we are planning some more workshops even after the end of this project.
Loro hanno avuto proprio l'esperienza nell'anno scorso, appunto, in cui si sono trovati con uno dei tantissimi purtroppo terremoti che ci sono nella loro area, e quindi con la necessità appunto di dover gestire una massa enorme
they've had the necessity of managing an enormous mass of people who couldn't work because those young people, as we know, for various organizational reasons, very often do not have a specific knowledge or specific competencies that can become useful in those contexts. This is why we tried to phase those aspects as well as their teamwork. Another aspect in terms of cross-functional competencies, so help those people to work as a team, also involving other professional profiles that normally come into play in such situations. Third and last phase in our activities was to validate the processes, which means that in the end we produced and put on our platform all the materials we gathered, and we considered whether they were okay or not with all of our stakeholders, and the programs and the materials were evaluated during various workshops that have been an important moment for us to review and validate our work. Thanks to the 24 workshops implemented in the partner countries with the involvement of a high number of people, not just the partners but also stakeholders in more general respect. But before I leave the floor to the next speaker, I know we had a roundtable discussion. We should have had a roundtable discussion, but let me conclude with what we intend to do as Iiple. We are a school. We've been here for 75 years, and we would like to be here for 75 more years. So what we do right now has been utilized in the project, and the project has provided more insight into the issues. So the things we're already doing are training courses on seismic events for technical people. With the Sisma bonus, we have conducted a series of preparation courses for the construction companies and with the workers. Unfortunately, we can't tackle the issues of incentives, but Italy has been very much incentivized in that respect. I would like to stress that in Italy, in the last 2 years, we have had the possibility of conducting some energy efficiency works to improve the existing building, and the state pays 110% of the works, of the construction works. I'm saying this for our foreign guests. This is something special that has somehow doped the entire sector. It was positive in some respect, given the situation when it was first implemented during the pandemic. It has had positive effects, but also adverse ones. Let me conclude by saying that while energy efficiency and thermal insulation have been developed enormously, all the other interventions that were funded at the level of 110% by the state with public funds are more or less 1/10 of the overall construction activities, which tells you how difficult these topics are, also under anti-seismic respect. Please do not lose hope. I've been working in this field for decades, so last but not least, we're collaborating with other schools within the racism network that carries out awareness-raising activities for young people and provides technical training too, also through social media, so as to raise the awareness on seismic risks. Those are not just simple tools. We're considering to tackle the issue of seismic risks in historic centers. For sure, as I deal with these things as a trainer, I understand that technical people
in queste settimane su questo tema, sulla sismica, sulla vulnerabilità sismica, eccetera.
As well as young people are helped a lot by further acquisition of knowledge. For example, when they see models in function, and so they make a practical hands-on experience of what they've learned. So this also impacts on their perception and on the role that each one of us is asked to play. The floor has now Simona Tondelli.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It is a great pleasure to be here with you to close the day. I'm sorry if I got here a bit late. This is the end conference of that marks the end of the project that was started 4 years ago because of the pandemic and quite a few earthquakes that followed our road, and we also wonder whether our project was a sign of bad luck or not, or maybe because we were right in choosing the challenge, the topic, a European project concerning a specific area of Europe, the Adriatic Ionian area, which is characterized by this common feature, namely a natural seismic risk that concerns all these various countries. And we also realized that there were some differences in how to address them. The cooperation projects are also meant to identify the ready solutions, to share best practices, to learn from each other. And therefore, we, from the university world, it is important to really have an exchange of views with all the various stakeholders. It has been a long way, challenging but interesting. I really hope that you appreciated the variety and complexity of the studies that we were involved in. And what's special about it, that characterizes this project, concerning the various cases when we hear about earthquakes and seismic events. These events are quite technical, and so engineers and geologists will cover it. This project is coordinated by my research group. You have already met Professor Santangelo, Engineer Sarsani. We are engineers and developers, downtown planners, and so that has been our approach to this project. We want it to be a comprehensive approach. Why is that so? Because, of course, without denying the need and importance of taking action at the technological level when the buildings get into focus, we need to go back and carry out and implement a supply chain concerning all the various stakeholders that are involved, including the public authorities, the national scale, the regional scale, the municipalities that are more directly involved, freelancers, professionals, and voluntary workers as well. So the project has tried to keep all these stakeholders together, and so as town developers, town planners, we wanted to see what should be done to channel public and private resources to cater for and address priorities. We have talked about various types of training at the urban level, the building level. What should come first? What is to be prioritized? What is the starting point? Because it is most at risk, most urgent, or what can trigger off further actions, improvements, and that can be, therefore, the thrust towards a renewal and regeneration of our territory. Our territory is characterized by historic buildings and monuments. This is a high value. We've got a high cultural heritage, but these buildings also have an important social, cultural value, like squares, public spaces, meeting places. That is why we have taken various spaces and buildings into account. The third part, being a person from the university, that is quite obvious. Education, training is one of our musts, missions. And in that case, it has been addressed in a different way, not just when it comes to university level, but also at all levels. And I think that is an important aim of our project, to provide the various stakeholders with the various types of tools that should be modular, flexible, also in terms of self-learning, that might be very useful. And today we are about to conclude this project, this process. Nice partnerships have come about and we're very happy about them. They don't stop. Many more ideas are in the pipeline, and hopefully those who can use our results, the findings, our project, I really hope that can serve as a stimulus to go on and talk about these issues. We have therefore talked about the various incentives. So it is not the end of a project, but also the beginning of a new partnership that can therefore make all our Ionian and Adriatic areas to be improved and regenerated. I would like to really thank the Giorgia colleagues and all the others from the technological area, and all the partners who have worked with us, because as is usually the case, the project is successful if everybody collaborates. And I think that this nice collaboration is improved by the excellent human relations, personal relations, and the pleasure to work together. So thanks for this very nice experience, and we hope that we can work well in the future. One last thing for attendees, for the technicians, and use Iiple for training and refresher courses together with Michele Naldi and together with Giovanni Marinelli, who is fond of this issue, to deal with the technical issues. So we will make our best to organize a similar workshop, and we will keep you updated and briefed so that we can focus on technical aspects to see what can be done, what the main difficulties have been when it comes to the various typical regional situations, but we want to come up with technical issues rather than other more general issues. So thank you to all of you for attending this seminar, and we hope to meet again soon. Thank you.